Hey everybody, it's Paul. Welcome to the show. Nora is off this week gallivanting around some muddy trails in lovely rainy California. And so I'm doing the show intro by myself this week. Lucky you. Anyway, we recorded this episode some time ago on narcissism. We both love this episode and think it's an important episode to listen to. So without further ado and any more words from me, let's get on with the show.
Freedom, freedom over fame. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
Okay, Paul, we are talking about narcissism today. And what is your take on this? I want to know why you want to talk about this today.
Well, I mean, we are living in an increasingly narcissistic country. I think we talked about that when we were deciding on this topic. And, you know, identifying different kinds of narcissistic behavior is important, especially for empaths. And I think we both identify as empaths because those are the people who definitely fall prey to narcissists the most. You know, people pleasers, empaths, things like that.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people are people pleasers and empaths. I mean, we're both recovering people pleasers, right. But it's very easy to start to question yourself instead of another person's behavior when you're a people pleaser or an empath, and so you can get in some pretty tricky situations in your head when that happens, when really a lot of the behavior is coming from somewhere else and doesn't really have much to do with you at all. So that was my interest in it. How about you, Nora?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think our culture, at least here in the U.S., I think we are old enough to have at least seen the narcissistic culture kind of develop over our life.
Yeah, really taken over.
Yeah, it's really, and social media has not helped at all.
No.
As we talk about that a lot, but you can see it in our political systems and in capitalism, and you can see it everywhere. And I think for those of us, like you said, who are more empathic and sensitive and are looking for like a kinder, fairer world, we can fall prey to narcissists. We can attract them
because they're very charming and they're very, they're
charismatic.
They're very charismatic. They're good persuaders. There's and those skills are, as we said before, those skills are praised in this modern world because a lot of them add up to financial success, business success, things like that. So, and since that's what we value the most in this country, a lot of the time, then a lot of narcissists, I think, aren't called on their behavior at all because it works somehow for them, right?
Well, these systems definitely will. What's the word I'm looking for? They reward narcissists quite often, and it doesn't mean it's all the time, but we definitely see it. So we just want to take a crack at identifying narcissism in our lives and how to have strategies around narcissists. Yeah. Anyway, now that's just my take.
You might have known already, how to identify some narcissistic behavior, but I think there's some value here. We're going to go through the different types of narcissists, and there are several. And you may, as you're going through, and in fact, I know when we were going through this list, we're like, yes, I see a person who fits that description, who is in my life.
I dated them.
Right, I dated them. I was. They were my boss.
Or that might be my parent, or my boss, or my brother, or my sister. Yes, absolutely.
So you might identify something in here as narcissistic behavior where previously you either put it on yourself or you just didn't think that was it. It was simply annoying to you or whatever. So we're going to go through the types, and then we're going to talk about how narcissism comes about, because it is a spectrum and not just a diagnosis. And then we're going to go through some other definitions of things narcissists do, like love bombing, and how to spot a narcissist and having boundaries when dealing with them.
And real quick, I just want to say that a lot of the information that we were consuming to prepare for this episode, a lot of it came from Dr. Ramani, who is like an expert on narcissism. So I just want to give credit where it's due about where I was learning a lot about narcissism.
Yeah, she's incredible, and you should definitely, after this episode, go and give it some time. But then
go to YouTube channel.
Yeah, go to her YouTube channel, because she's got a lot of different, very specific videos on dealing with different kinds of stuff that mostly revolve around narcissism, although she does go further afield than narcissism in her stuff. She just happens to be considered one of the foremost experts on it. But kudos to you, Doctor. Thank you for all your
Yes.
work and all your research. And we certainly got a lot out of your talks and out of your research for this podcast. So thanks for that.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. Let's start about. Let me define what narcissism
Yes,
is.
please.
And this is the best way that we have come to define it. But a narcissist is a person who has a low or performative empathy. And just real quick, like performative empathy is kind of like the surface empathy, and that is someone who will, check in on how you're doing, but once you go deeper, they kind of tune out, or it becomes like too much emotion for them, and they're like, "I'm out." So that's what we mean by that.
I just want to jump in and just clarify that is low or performative empathy. It might have sounded like lower performative empathy to you when you said it, but it's low or performative empathy. No, I just wanted to make that clear to the listener.
No, that's a good
because that's a very important distinction.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that, Nora. Go ahead.
No, you're good. So yes, a narcissist, a person who has lower or performative empathy, entitlement, egocentric, they're arrogant, they can need chronic validation and admiration, often need to be in control, often are poorly emotionally regulated, so they have bits of like tantrums, they're prone to strong shows of rage if they're frustrated or not getting their way. They're kind of thin-skinned, they don't take criticism well. They're pretentious and often superficial. So that's just the kind of textbook narcissist that we are talking about.
And that's sort of the smorgasbord of symptoms that were listed there. Not all of them exhibit all of those symptoms, and some exhibit those higher than others. And you'll see, we're about to go into the types of narcissists here, and you'll see which ones exhibit which traits as we go through this. Okay.
Excellent. Do you want to start with the different types?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a wide variety.
Yeah, there is a wide variety, but let's start. We can say that narcissism is not a diagnosis, right? Narcissistic personality disorder is a diagnosis, but narcissism is a maladaptive, antagonistic personality style is what it is.
It's a style.
It's a style of personality. It's not, and some people may be mildly narcissistic, and others can be malignant narcissists. And the root of it comes from a deep insecurity. Like the personality style is developed as a suit of armor of sorts around the unprocessed insecurity and shame. The shame that people will see through them, that they aren't inherently enough. That's main.
Right.
Like power and dominance and control motivates them because it makes them feel safe, right? Because this is coming from a trauma where they did not feel safe for the most part. And we'll talk about the different kinds of things that can lead to different kinds of narcissism, but that's basically where we are with it. So let's get on to let's go tit for tat with this, Nora. Why don't you do the first one and I'll do the second one and so on.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the first one we're going to identify is known as the grandiose narcissist.
This one you all know. Yeah. You all know this one.
The most well-known type. Yeah, this is the most well-known type of narcissist. They have an inflated sense of self-importance, a deep need for excessive attention and admiration, a lack of empathy for others. And some examples of that are like a CEO constantly boasts about their achievements and takes credit for others' work and believes they're irreplaceable in the company. So I think if most of us are at this age, at least we've run into a few.
We've run into those for sure. Yes. Absolutely. And not just at work either, but everywhere else. Yeah. All right. Number 2, here's a vulnerable or covert narcissist. I think this is the second most common one, Nora. Is that right? Is that what Dr. Romani said about it?
Yeah, I think the covert and the grandiose and the malignant are the three most common.
The top 3 on the hit parade of narcissism.
Exactly.
So the vulnerable or the covert narcissist, they have similar traits to the grandiose narcissist, but they internalize their feelings more. So they're hypersensitive to criticism and may appear shy or self-deprecating while still feeling superior to others. So it's a sneaky little kind, right? So like an example would be an artist who outwardly appears modest but internally believes their work is vastly superior to others, and they may become deeply hurt by criticism of their art, right? So that's just a small example of the vulnerable
never ran into them in the dance
scene. No. Certainly never in the dance scene was that ever. Nobody had an inflated sense of their skill set.
Self-importance or anything.
Oh, boy.
Sorry, not sorry.
We're not naming names this podcast, y'all, but we are going to talk about stuff. Yeah. All right, next one.
All right, the third one is the malignant narcissist. Yes, this is considered the most severe type of narcissist. And they combine narcissism with antisocial and paranoid traits. They often exhibit aggression and a lack of conscience. Sound like anyone we know
Yeah,
in this?
right. I mean, you can say that about everyone. Yeah.
I know. So an example is a political leader who uses their power to manipulate and harm others, justifying their actions as necessary for the greater good while really serving their own interests. We don't need to really go into who that might sound like.
Just thank goodness just thank goodness it never happens in this country, Nora. Okay, can
never,
we just say that?
It
never
not in any
never
happens
here.
Anyway,
thank goodness for that. At least we're free of that. Yes. Yeah. All right, next one. But this is more. This one I hadn't really heard of before we did this research. Right, was this somatic narcissist, a somatic narcissist? These individuals derive their narcissistic supply primarily from their physical appearance or sexual prowess. Now, I've certainly have run into a lot of these people, but I didn't know that was labeled somatic narcissism. So an example would be a person who's obsessed with their looks, constantly posts selfies on social media, and believes their attractiveness entitles them to special treatment. So
hello influencers.
Hello influencers. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. But yeah, I mean, we're not gonna throw everybody under the bus under this thing. But you do start to see how narcissistic our society is when you start to break down these different types. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you also see that there's a spectrum of like mild narcissistic tendencies to like full blown. And you can even just see that from the somatic narcissist on Instagram. Anyway. So the next one is the cerebral narcissist. They pride themselves on their intelligence and knowledge, and they use it to feel superior to others. And pardon my language here, but this is who I used to call them the mental masturbators. Example is a professor who belittles students' opinions, constantly name drops famous academics they've met, believes their intellect makes them better than their colleagues. They're the people who are just like, at their root insecure, but also have knowledge and or intelligence in an area and need to have everyone around them know how smart they are.
I hate to keep ringing the YouTube bell here, but boy, does this remind me of some folks on YouTube, some, quote unquote experts or gurus who are obviously love to hear themselves do it. So and there you go. All right. Next is a communal narcissist. They derive their sense of superiority from their perceived helpfulness and care for others, often exaggerating their contributions to the community. Right. So like a volunteer who constantly talks about how much they help others, exaggerates their impact, and gets upset if they're not recognized for their quote unquote selfless acts. Right. This is the people who film themselves giving money to homeless people and
exactly.
Like that.
All that stuff.
All that stuff. Yeah.
It's actually not about the person they're helping. It's about
them. It's all about them. Yeah, their perception.
Yeah. Yep. And then the last one that we're going to cover here is the spiritual narcissist. And they use spiritual or religious beliefs to feel superior, often believing they have special insights or connection to higher powers. An example is a self-proclaimed guru who claims to have unique spiritual knowledge, manipulates followers for personal gain, and dismisses other spiritual paths as inferior. Hello in Jonestown.
Right. Well, I was going to say, there goes our cult we were going to start, Nora. Now we can't. People are going to label us spiritual narcissists after they listen to this. Yeah. It's okay, guys. Join our cult anyway. It's a good one.
I know, right? It's a good one. Okay, now we are going to move on how people become narcissists.
Yeah, that's really important to understand.
Yeah. So first thing we want to state is that narcissists are not born; they are made. And most narcissists are, they're formed from the childhood trauma that they carry, and a lot of it stems from children who were either neglected or abused, or didn't get their attachment style needs met from their parents, and so they're, again, it's not a matter of like it's in their DNA. It's a matter of they didn't have certain key things as children in an emotional spectrum met, for lack of a better way of saying it. And so what I was going to say about that is this is what's interesting to me is like the brain is different in narcissists. So, or at least for like malignant ones. What happens is the childhood trauma that they experience, I think it's the limbic system in the brain is what is, if I'm not mistaken, is what is responsible for emotional regulation. That gets stunted by the trauma they experience. And as they develop, as they grow and develop, the prefrontal cortex, which is like, the functioning grows, but the limbic system with the emotional regulation kind of lags behind or doesn't develop as fast. So that's why you have a lot of narcissists who will explode in rage,
Mm-hmm.
or they're just they don't have great emotional regulation, and then you're kind of subject to it.
Right.
So this is like so for instance, during the pandemic, how many people just like freaked out over being asked to mask,
Yeah.
like over something that is reasonable to someone else? They perceive it as like someone's trying to control me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I won't let them. And so it's that's where it's kind of like the interesting part of me is like how their brains are kind of wired a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And right. And there's also like, there's different traumas lead to different outcomes, right? Or different experiences lead to different outcomes with narcissism, right? There's also the kind of narcissist that's created by overindulgence, right? And
Yeah.
we're seeing that now as the first group of people who had helicopter parents are reaching adulthood, right? These folks are generally bitter that because they had everything done for them, they're lacking in skills, while simultaneously feeling like the victim of the world. And they're constantly told that they were constantly told that they were special, and now they're finding out more special. Yeah. And now they're finding out that the world doesn't work like that. And some of them develop narcissistic tendencies like overblown self-importance and entitlement in order to deal with those emotions.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like to think of the people that you encounter that are like exhibiting narcissistic behaviors. I think one of the most important takeaways from this particular show is that it's not actually about you, even if you are if they're projecting their rage or their anger or even what will go into it, their love bombing onto you.
Yeah.
So do you want to go on to love bombing?
Yeah. Yeah, we can do that. But I just wanted to say as well at this point is that we all have narcissistic tendencies, right? I mean, this is not like it's not like Nora and I are saying we don't have any of those things, right?
Everyone, I think
we all do. Everyone does. So but that doesn't mean that everyone's a narcissist, right? It just means that everybody has narcissistic tendencies or narcissistic patterns that they've developed in order to deal with those. We've all had the trauma or we've all had the overindulgence, one or the other, and we all get the artifacts from that. It's just that if limbic system developed in concert with the prefrontal cortex, then we're okay. And if it didn't, lagging behind, you're going to have some emotional regulation problems and all kinds of other stuff that go along with it.
Well, I'll also say this. You can have multiple children in a family who all had the same parents, right?
Yeah.
And then, someone's brother can be a narcissist and someone's sister can be like the kindest, most empathic person. So again, it's not, there are different temperaments in children, and it's how they are formed.
Yeah.
So there are different people who can take their trauma and grow from it, or can, just find like deeper empathy for people who are also going through it. And then there are people who just turn into narcissists.
Yeah.
So that, it's it's kind of this weird spectrum.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. Well, let's move on to how they operate and talk about love bombing and other stuff like that.
Yeah. So love bombing. Love bombing is kind of a term. It's when a narcissist will basically, it's a manipulation tactic where a narcissist overwhelms their target person with excessive affection, attention, adoration in like a short period of time. And so it's like, they're not like manipulating from like that they're aware of it often. It's like just how they operate.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. It's not like they're strategic about it, like I'm going to do this, but they probably feel emotionally attached to someone and really want the attention and admiration to receive back. So they flood that person with dopamine essentially.
Yeah.
And so that's where like the empaths have to be really aware, because the narcissist will often target the person that holds their attention towards them. So if there's a narcissist that is like, I don't know, like talking about something deep, and the empath is like, oh, well, tell me more about that, and like trying to help them, it's like all of a sudden like, oh, they have the attention from someone that they will love bomb. So that's what we want to say about the anyone who's empathic.
And when that attention runs out, then it's on to the next thing. And the empath is left with like, what happened there? I don't even know. I don't know the wake of it. I don't even know what happened. And the narcissist is like, well, I'm on to the next thing that give me more juice for my narcissism.
Well, and that's exactly it. So the narcissist, is essentially what they are subconsciously or maybe unconsciously often, or maybe sometimes they are consciously, I don't know. They, at their core, don't feel enough, right? At their core, they feel deep shame, or they don't feel enough. And so they're constantly looking for outside resources to validate them and to admire them, because that's what they feed off of. And so what the professionals call it is like they're looking for suppliers. And once the supply runs out, they are moving on to the next supplier, and they don't even think about the person that they're leaving in the wake. So you can see that with people who have gone through terrible divorces with narcissists and that are kind of like in the wake of like, my God, we had all this good time together for a while, and I don't know where that went, and like kind of pining it. And then the narcissist has moved on to their like second or third husband or wife.
They're just
like next in the chain. So
Absolutely.
It's not about you.
No.
If you are not if you're in the target of the narcissist, it's just they're looking for the supply.
Absolutely. And the back to the love bombing thing for a second. Let's talk about characteristics of that so people can identify it a little bit better. So we've got intense and excessive displays of affection, constant communication with calls, texts, and messages, like lavish gifts or grand gestures, promises of a perfect future together, rapid progression of a relationship. That's a big one. Pressure for commitment in that relationship too, right? And it's just they've just developed a very effective way it's a very effective thing to use when an empath is your target. And, and like Nora said, they probably don't even know they're using it, but subconsciously they do. And it's, it's an effective way to draw people in and get the supply from the supplier that they need.
Yeah, and the biggest thing I think for a narcissist is like not be discovered as the fraud that they believe they are.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so it's like their suit of armor is constantly to hide themselves, and then if someone like kind of calls them out on their stuff, often you're going to be met with rage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or just like some unreasonable kind of like if you criticize, or if you're just like even a healthy criticism for like a malignant narcissist will turn into like they are going to try to end you, because God forbid that the biggest fear for them is that they're going to be publicly seen as like incompetent and a fraud. So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the main goals of love bombing.
Okay. Yeah.
So with the love bombing that we were just talking about, the way it operates is the narcissist is creating like a quick emotional dependency from someone, right? And so because once they have that emotional dependency, then they can manipulate it.
Right.
And so they'll make the supplier, the target person, feel special and uniquely understood. They'll distract from red flags or concerning behaviors that they're exhibiting, and they'll set up a dynamic where the narcissist has control. And that is the biggest takeaway is if you encounter a narcissist or you're in a narcissistic relationship, the control thing becomes like a big thing. And whether that's physical control or emotional control, mental control, they're looking to do that.
Yeah. And the love bombing thing, or actually, relationships in general with narcissists generally take on three phases, right? The first one is the idealization phase, where the love bombing occurs and is really heavy in there. The second one is the devaluation phase, where the narcissist begins to withdraw affection, and that's where empaths are like, "What's going on?" And the third one is the discard phase, where the narcissist may leave or significantly reduce attention and is on to the next supplier.
Yeah, I had an ex-boyfriend who did all this.
Yeah, we all have, right? I mean, I mean, not all of us probably. I hope you haven't had that, but I've certainly had it in my life too. But
I've definitely had it in my life, and it was really hard because that kind of love bombing, it really just feels like really special and unique. And at the time I was young, and it was like, okay, there was this connection that I felt, and then it was the takeaway. It was the hot cold, and it kept me just. It was a really kind of a, excuse my language here, but kind of a mind fuck for a while, because it was always my part in that relationship ended up being like, God, I know it can be good, so how do I get it back to the good, right? And then it was a lot of bullshit manipulation, essentially, that I kind of came. It opened my eyes. Let me just say that to future relationships. So if you're not learning from past ones, I hope this helps you understand the signs of those people so you can have better boundaries.
Yeah, and certainly you shouldn't feel any shame by being taken in by a narcissist if that's the thing. I mean, you almost have to experience it to know what it is, and then it's not you, and it wasn't your fault. I mean, that's the main takeaway, right? Nora experienced it when she was young. I experienced it when I was young. Like, we didn't have any boundaries back then, right? We didn't even know what boundaries are.
Or the tools. Right, exactly. I didn't have the tools to even understand what this was about. Right. So, and this is why we were doing this episode, because if I had these tools when I was younger and was able to spot these people in my life, I would have saved myself a lot of heartbreak. Let's just put it that way. And a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Like self-doubt, really,
Yeah.
So.
Right, because you really do spiral. I mean, as an empath and a people pleaser, you really do start to spiral and be like, I really failed in that. And you look back on it years later and you go, I didn't fail. That person completely manipulated me or whatever. So the upshot is when you know better, you do better. That's our main thing we say around here all the time. And it's if you've been in that, please don't take on the shame of you've done something wrong in there, or you should have done something different at the time. You didn't know. There was the tools you had at the time you had them. You didn't know. And now you know. So you can go forth and do better. All right.
Yeah. And if this sounds like someone that you are currently in a relationship with, or that you have children with and whatnot, we'll get into a little bit of coping tools and things like that a little bit later in the show. But it's a hard place to be. Let me just say.
Well, let's talk about how to spot them, shall we? Let's do that. Right.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Let's see the warning signs of a narcissist. Feeling overwhelmed by the intensity of attention. Like that's like if someone is like spotlight, like all attention on you.
Yeah.
There's a little warning bell.
Yeah.
The pressure to reciprocate or commit quickly. Been through that.
Yeah.
Them guilt tripping if you don't respond as they desire.
Ooh, I've been through that one. Yep.
Been through that one.
Yep.
And the person seems too good to be true. So those are not the only warning signs, but those are the ones that we're going to pull out.
Certainly I had a relationship in my 20s that was a lot like that. I mean, I think I might have even talked about it before on the podcast, but I was her project, and I, being such a people pleaser, I was like, I got to live up to this. I have to live up to this standard, but the target was always moving for the standard. And it was all about manipulating me inside that relationship, because the moving target I could never hit kept me in doubt all the time, kept me in doubt of myself, kept me in doubt that I would find somebody else if I left this relationship, kept me in doubt of, almost all my skills and, everything else, because, she would shift that target. And then, and then if I didn't hit it, the guilt thing would come in, just like you mentioned in the last one. And it would further crush my self-esteem down and crush my sense of self-worth down and make me really question, if I was a good person or not, really. And when I got out of that, it was like, it took me a couple of years to turn around and realize that wasn't me.
Right. And that's the biggest thing, I think, is just the realization it had nothing to do with you and who you are.
Yeah.
Is everything to do about them and their own trauma and insecurity, really.
Yeah.
And I also want to make sure to say this. The thing with narcissists is that a lot of people get into these relationships with them thinking that they can change them. And the thing is, with a narcissist, 9 times out of 10, they are never going to change.
That's right.
They're just not, they don't want to change.
That's the depressing part of this podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's no cure for it, right? Like, so even if someone has like narcissistic, they've been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, there's really, as far as we understand, there's no cure for it. They don't want to be cured. They just want to, they're going to leave a wake. So,
and even Dr. Ramani, who we get a lot of our research from for this podcast, this particular one has said that she has worked with narcissists in her practice, and she's done some good work, and they've made progress in there. But her bottom line is that it's not all the way. And usually they don't want to change. Usually they're undiagnosed, period. And usually they don't seek help. And those that do, it's a really slow road, and doubtful whether they can ever make it back, fully from all that stuff. So that is that is what depressed me about doing this research a little bit, is that there is no cure for it. And if you're in a relationship already with a narcissist, it's really hard, because odds are they're not going to change. That's a hard fact to swallow, right?
Yeah. But you can figure out the ways to step into your own power.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that next too. There are definitely ways to protect yourself from this stuff. So let's talk about some other ways to spot a narcissist, Nora. So we got grandiose sense of self-importance, right? The exaggerated achievement and talents, right? Preoccupation with fantasies, right? Obsessed with ideas of unlimited success or power or brilliance, beauty, ideal love, so forth. Believe in their own specialness, need for admiration, sense of entitlement, interpersonally exploitative behavior, lack of empathy, envy of others, arrogant behaviors or attitudes, difficulty handling criticism. They monopolize conversations. They belittle people's looks. They belittle or look down on people, rather. They perceive as inferior. They exaggerate their own importance, achievements, or talents, take advantage of others, and they have an unwillingness to recognize the needs and feelings of others. And the list goes on. Yeah.
It goes on. They express disdain for those they feel are inferior to them.
Right.
It's like it's all about like, making other people small so they feel big.
Yeah.
They insist on having the best of everything, and like that's like they want the best car, they want the best outfit, they want the best trophy wife, or like
Yeah.
they just they use outside things to like signal to other people their importance, right?
Yeah.
And they expect constant praise and admiration because they can't get enough of that. They're like they're soul vampires. Really.
They are soul vampires. Yes, they are. But remember though that these traits exist on a spectrum, right? And everyone may display some of these behaviors occasionally. So a pattern of several of these traits is indicative of narcissistic tendencies, right? So when you couple them together, I mean, going down this list, I'm like, yep, I've acted entitled before. Yep, I've monopolized the conversation. Yes. Yep, I had difficulty handling criticism, but I'm not a narcissist by the definition.
No, and then here's the thing with an actual narcissist, I think we all do those things.
Yeah.
We all like, oh, well, just because you've interrupted or turned a conversation around to express something that you've experienced doesn't necessarily mean that you are a narcissist.
Right.
Really, what is a huge sign of narcissistic behavior is if you don't apologize, right? If you become aware of something that you did that was maybe unskillful, as you would put Paul, and you don't take accountability for it, right? Or if you won't, like you won't claim your role in those relationships. That is your contribution or of how you screwed up.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, then you might be a narcissist.
Yeah. I mean, the words like narcissism get thrown around a lot these days. And like with TikTok and everything like that, it's like not everybody who's labeled a narcissist is a narcissist. It may just be jackass behavior, which is what I certainly
we all are subject to
mine too, right? We all are, right?
Yeah.
We're all terribly imperfect, but to label everybody a narcissist as soon as they exhibit any one of this list of behaviors is not exactly fair to people, right? So there are probably fewer than we think in the world. But having said that, there are a lot of them. So let's talk about boundaries, Nora. What boundaries?
Yes.
Tell us what boundaries we need when we deal with narcissists, because that's the number one way to deal with them is effective boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Hit me.
So
let me know.
Boundaries, man, they are everything for any relationship. So
we have a whole episode on boundaries, y'all. So rewind and listen to that one because that's a good one too. Also,
just the importance of boundaries in again in every relationship. That's what makes a successful relationship.
Yeah.
So boundaries, yes. So time and attention boundaries. So you're going to limit the amount of time you're spending with a narcissist the best you can. And you're going to set specific times for communication and stick to those. And then don't respond immediately to non-urgent messages or calls. And that can be really difficult if someone's like a narcissist and is just like trying to basically manipulate or control the situation of your time and energy by, I don't know, maybe like calling you 40 times at work.
Yeah, or especially if you're in the same house. I mean, that gets really hard to try to limit your,
very hard.
How are you going to set specific times for communication with a narcissist you live with? That's not going to be easy, right? Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is like you set the boundary and you tell them the consequence in a neutral tone. And if they overstep that boundary, you have to follow through.
Yeah, you have
the same way that you would do with like a toddler. You can't you can't set a boundary, give them a consequence, have them cross the boundary, and then not follow through because they're just going to know that your boundaries, are suggestions and not actual boundaries.
Right. That gets back to what I was talking about in our podcast about boundaries, which is terms and conditions, right? Terms are your unalterable things that you live your life by, and conditions are the things that can screw those up. So if you said, I'm only going to talk to you between 11 and 1, and then, but if you had a condition on that, unless you're feeling really bad, or unless you really need me, or unless like what? Right. No, the boundary is the boundary, right? So set your term, and then don't let a condition come in and screw it up.
Yeah, here's a good example. Yeah. You are in a relationship or with a narcissist, and they want to call you at every chance they can while you're at work. You can say, do not call me at work unless it's a true emergency, which involves the house is on fire or someone is bleeding out.
Right. Yeah.
And if they call you and they overstep that, then give them the consequences to what that boundary is, and and just let them know that this is my boundary and this is the consequence.
Yeah.
if they do that.
Yep.
Anyway, you want to take the next boundary?
Yeah. So emotional boundaries here. So refuse to take responsibility for the narcissist's emotions, right? Don't share personal information or vulnerabilities. That's a big one because they tend to turn that around and prey on that, and avoid engaging in arguments or emotional manipulation. Yeah. I mean, the first one on this list is just good policy with everybody in your life, right? I mean, you shouldn't have to manage other people's emotions, or certainly you shouldn't have to take responsibility for them, especially, right? So that's a big one in there. And then the not sharing the personal information or vulnerabilities is such a big one because the tables turn, they will latch onto that, and the tables will turn and weaponize it against you, right? So you got to be really careful with that stuff.
Absolutely. And like, that's the thing. There's a lot of the emotional manipulation will always be it's the gaslighting, really. And if you don't know what gaslighting is, I think most people do, but it's from I think it was like a play or a movie called Gaslight, where a husband was blowing out the gas lamps that his wife was seeing, and when she would say, like, "Did that lamp go out?" That was just on, and he would say no, and act as if she was quote unquote. He was trying to drive her crazy,
convince her that she was crazy. Yeah,
exactly.
Have you never seen the film Gaslight, Nora?
I know of the film.
You should see the film Gaslight. Everybody should see the film Gaslight, because it's not because of gaslighting, but because it's an amazing movie. You should also.
Well, that's good to know.
It's incredible.
I'll add that to the list. I'll add that to the list. Is it as good as Pee-wee's Big Adventure, though?
Nothing is as good as Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Don't even put it in the same category. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Cool. Let's go on to the next one. What do you got?
All right, we got physical boundaries. Maintain your personal space. Set clear rules about physical touch if necessary, and ensure privacy by limiting access to personal spaces. Yeah. That's if you've got like a brother or a parent who's a narcissist and you have your own house, maybe don't give them your keys. It's the personal boundaries are a very big one for me, especially like for a narcissist will see their target as like their own property sometimes. So those are big. Anything to add to that?
No, just that it's these things are hard sometimes to set these boundaries. I know we're saying these as if they're easy
simple, not easy.
They're simple, not easy. I mean, if you work in a cubicle situation and your coworker is invading your personal space all the time, and yet you don't have a door, it's very difficult then to set that boundary, right? I mean, because if you're in an open work situation, it's very difficult to set physical boundaries within that when everybody's moving around and all those things. And
it's so annoying.
You might have to.
I just got triggered. I just remembered an old coworker that used to do that. Used to make me nuts.
Yeah, I got triggered just because I used to work in a cubicle and I don't want to anymore ever. So there you go. I don't like it.
Yep.
Don't prefer it. Feels very much like jail to me. Anyway, that's about all I had to add to all these boundaries that we say. We understand that they're simple but not easy sometimes, and depending on your situation, you might have to alter and or find a different boundary to set,
or go to HR
or go to HR, one or the other. Yeah, absolutely. All right, next one is conversational boundaries. So you want to redirect conversations to become manipulative or abusive, right? And you want to use phrases like, "I'm not comfortable discussing that," or "let's change the subject." Those things generally work a little bit better. And you want to avoid engaging in conversations about sensitive topics. So again, personal information, any kind of vulnerabilities you might have, emotional stuff.
Something that they can weaponize.
Anything they can jump on and weaponize and turn around again, and use that to manipulate you. Yeah.
Well, also I would say like their classic narcissistic behavior is someone who will like constantly try to quote unquote play devil's advocate and like get a rise out of you in the conversation. And one of the tactics I like to employ, and outside of like I'm not comfortable talking with that, because sometimes it's like, well, why? And that boundary. Sometimes I'll just, if they ask me a question that I don't want to answer, and this is with most people, that I'm like, I don't, I know in my head, I'm like, I don't trust this person fully to give them my take on anything.
Yeah.
Is a lot of times I'll just say, why do you want to know?
Yeah.
And I make them answer that. And if I just kind of throw it back on their lap, the other thing I will say about a narcissist is a lot of times they want to like argue, and then they'll be like, "Oh, I was just kidding," or when they get a rise out of you. It's like everything is to get a rise out of you so that they can kind of manipulate and control your emotions.
Right. Because once you're out of control, then they've got control.
Yeah, then they've got control, and that's how they
ceded
feel
your
safe.
Control to them. Yeah,
and that's how they feel safe, right? Yeah. But sometimes if they want to do that, what I'll just say is like if it's an agreement thing, I'll just say, well, I agree that we disagree, and it's just they have nothing to go with that. Yeah. Because you're agreeing with them about disagreeing with them. So yeah, anyway, it's just some small tactics to kind of put in your pocket when you are faced with folks like this.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's speed our way through the next 4 or 5 here, and then we'll get on to how you stay in your power when dealing with narcissists after that. So some of the other boundaries you can set. You want to do this, Nora? You want me to do this?
Sure. It's decision-making boundaries. Yeah. It's asserting your right to make decisions about your own life, refusing to be pressured into decisions you're not comfortable with, and using phrases like "I'll think about it and get back to you" to avoid immediate commitments. Yeah. Like simple stuff. Yeah. Financial boundaries are another one. Keep finances separate when possible, right? And this goes especially if you're obviously in a relationship. Don't lend money or co-sign loans. That's a big one, right? And be clear about financial expectations and stick to them. Another good 3 to set. Yep. Work boundaries, if applicable. Keep interactions professional and work related. Document all interactions and agreements. That's a big one I recommend to people.
Yeah,
involve HR or supervisors if boundaries are consistently violated. Yeah, you got to get that documented. So if there's any litigation, you are the one who's got the control there.
Yeah, don't let the documentation part slip because you're going to need that if things get worse. Otherwise, it's a he said, or whatever situation, right? And that's never good. So please, document your stuff if that's happening to you at work. Okay. Digital boundaries. So limit your social media interactions, use private settings to control what the narcissist can see, right? And be cautious about sharing personal information online because again, all of those things are just grist for the mill with a narcissist, right?
Yep. All right. We got expectation boundaries. Be clear about what you will and won't do. That's something you really shouldn't think about all the time.
All the time, not just with narcissists.
Yeah, exactly. Don't make promises you can't keep and avoid taking on the narcissist's responsibilities.
Yeah.
Throw it right back in their laps.
You got it. Consequence boundaries is another one. So clearly communicate consequences for boundary violations. We've talked about that before. And then you got to follow through, right? Consistently with stated consequences that you agreed on. And then be prepared to limit or end contact if boundaries are repeatedly disrespected.
Yeah, that should go with anyone.
That should go with anyone, not just a narcissist. I mean, that's the thing. This is healthy communication. We were talking about the other day, Nora, how it's like, people take directness as aggression so much these days. And I'm sorry, y'all, directness is the way to go because it gets things done and it makes you feel better. And as long as you don't mean it in an aggressive way, it is just being direct. And we all need to practice being direct more because we have these circuitous routes that we take conversationally, especially empaths and people pleasers, right?
Especially women,
right? Of course. Yeah, of course. It's society has said that you need to do that type of thing. And so, just be really careful with that stuff. Right?
Yeah. All right. We got self-care boundaries. Yep. Prioritize your own well-being. Don't sacrifice your needs or values to please the narcissist. Or anyone. And take time for yourself without feeling guilty. That's another huge one.
That's a hard one for us too, all the time, right? I mean, it's so hard to take time for yourself without feeling like you should be doing something else these days. Oh my goodness, that's hard. Yep. All right, last one on this list is verbal boundaries. So don't tolerate name calling, insults, or verbal abuse from anybody. Use I statements to express your feelings and needs, and then set clear rules about acceptable language and tone.
Yep. Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah. And we're just going to end this little section with just to remember that setting boundaries isn't about controlling the narcissist, but about defining what you will and won't accept in your interactions. Be prepared for resistance and stay consistent in enforcing them. You can't budge from that as much as they'll keep coming at you. You just have to hold tight and
I mean, just expect the worst when you start setting boundaries with a narcissist because they're gonna be like, "Whoa, you saying I can't be in your cubicle or whatever? Yeah. Oh, I'm just kidding or whatever." You know, that kind of behavior is like very prevalent with ones that I've dealt with in the work environment. Like, why are you so uptight or whatever? I'm not uptight. I'm protecting my peace. Okay, that's what it is. I'm just protecting my own peace, and that's something you have to learn how to do. Yeah, go ahead.
I just had to.
Yeah.
Remember, it's a trigger one. I had this guy I worked with who was a bit of a narcissist. I had brought in my lunch repeatedly and with like my name on the bag in the refrigerator.
Yes. I can't wait to hear what happened.
Time I would go like 4 or 5 times this happened where I went to go get my lunch. on my short break where I was like starving. And if you know me with food, I'm like food aggressive.
Yeah.
It was gone. And no one else in where I worked, I think other people knew, but they didn't want to tell me because they knew I was going to like burn shit down.
Yeah, right. Of course.
The guy ended up like getting fired or whatever, but I found out later that he was stealing my lunches and eating them. And I'm sure it was like a power move bullshit. And I was like, to this day, I'm like, if I ever come across this guy, like tackle him, you know.
Dude, I like it. Your rage doesn't come from narcissism. It comes from a whole different aspect. Trauma.
Exactly.
The mean streets of Philadelphia. That's all that is.
You know what it is? I'm all about power to and power with, but as soon as it's power over, when people are pulling power over moves, that's where I'm like, that's my hard boundary when I will just get very direct.
Yeah.
And yes, but anyway, so
I agree. Well,
that was a power move.
Yeah, and speaking of power moves, right? We want to talk now about how to stay in your power when you're dealing with narcissists, right?
All
you want to take this?
Good transition there, Paul.
Thank you. I'm a segue king.
That's pretty good. Yes, you are. All right. So, how to stay in your power and when you're dealing with a narcissist? The first one: set and maintain clear boundaries. Right. Decide what behavior you will and won't accept. Communicate those boundaries clearly and consistently, and be prepared to enforce the consequences if boundaries are violated.
Right.
That is like, I don't accept that you'll steal my lunch. If you do, I'm going to come at you.
Come
at them. Anyway, next.
2 and 3 kind of go together. So I'm going to combine them here, which is practice emotional detachment and use the gray rock method. So practice emotional detachment is like recognize that a narcissist's behavior is about them, not you. We talked about that. Don't take their actions or words personally. Maintain an emotional distance to protect yourself. Now, the gray rock method is how you it's a method to become uninteresting and unresponsive to the narcissist, right? You're just going to pretend you're going to act as if you're a gray rock, right? You're going to keep your interactions brief, boring, and unemotional. Like, just become the most boring person. And then they'll go and find another victim because they see they can't get a rise out of you, and all that stuff. Be that gray rock, right?
That's especially true in their tantrums.
Yeah, especially true in their tantrums. Like, don't respond. Like,
don't get sucked into the vortex of their soul-sucking bullshit.
Yeah, no response is good response when it comes to this stuff, and that's often a good thing. And I'll just throw in another little recommendation for meditation here, because that gives you the space to be a gray rock sometimes and not get into that vortex. You know what I mean? If you have a meditation practice, it gives you the pause between the input of the narcissist and the output. It gives you the chance to decide how you're going to respond to that narcissist without involving your emotional,
One of the ways I think about this when I deal with like narcissistic people that are like throwing a temper tantrum about whatever it is like, the thing that I think about is like, I think of them as like the 6-year-old that is the deeply hurt 6-year-old that is like throwing the tantrum. And I'm just like, okay. And even if they're like trying to weaponize whatever information they have about me or like try to pull me into it, it's just like, that is the thing. Like, if they say something, this is something that I really learned from my father, when they want to pull you into their own special complaints or tantrums or whatever, when they state something, just say, is that right? And like, that's the thing. It's neutral. Stay Switzerland.
Stay Switzerland.
Man. You just like, don't give them any fuel to their fire.
That's I mean, friend of the show, Regina Blaine, who's also my therapist, also, gave me one of the greatest one-word responses to everything that I could possibly get. It's so simple, but you just go, okay.
Exactly.
That's it. I want a t-shirt that just says, okay, period. And is that true? Yeah. Is that true?
Is that true? Is
absolutely.
That right?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
All right. So we'll move on to the next one to stay in your power, which is strengthen your self-esteem.
Right.
So regularly affirm your worth and value. You should be doing this with or without
with or without narcissists in your life.
Exactly. Engage in activities that make you feel confident and capable. Surround yourself with supportive people who truly appreciate you.
I think this one's really good if you're in a personal relationship with a narcissist, right? Because you need some kind of you need another perspective on you. You need an outlet, but also to be in a place where you are appreciated and not manipulated and everything. Sometimes when you get in a space like that, you realize how bad the relationship part of it is, right? But not until you get out of it and realize, that's not normal. Like I did with my relationship in my 20s.
The relationship I was in my 20s with a particular brand of narcissist. There was one of the warning signs to me was like not that they were trying to like isolate me, but I remember something coming up about like my family stuff, and he was like, well, you don't have to, you don't have to be around your family. It was like this. I recognized it at the time of like him trying to separate me even from my family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, those are little warning signs, little red flags about like, and he in particular didn't have a great relationship with his family because of childhood trauma. Go figure.
Right. Yeah.
And not that like childhood trauma, everyone's got it. And that's not like, ultimately I feel for him in the way that I hope that he will change, because at the root of it, he was deeply unhappy and deeply filled with shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that to me is just like, that's a tragedy, but that is not for me to carry.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Let's go on to educate yourself.
Yeah.
Learn about narcissistic personality disorder and manipulation tactics, like we were just talking about. And understanding that their behavior patterns can help you anticipate and prepare.
Right.
So yeah,
Yep.
this podcast episode is helping with that. I hope so.
I hope so too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Next one is document interactions, which we talked about already. So seek support is the one after that. Connect with trusted friends, family, or a therapist. Yeah, I highly recommend a therapist. We're big proponents of therapy. Join a support group for people dealing with narcissists, and have a support system that you can lean on and trust as well in your life. So those things are all good. I've not been to a support group for this type of thing, so I'm not sure what to recommend in that area, but a lot of them exist, certainly.
Yeah, and I will also say that if you are like the child of a narcissist, that is like its own brand of hard stuff, or maybe to a narcissist, and that's especially hard. And don't think that you can just like, go to the gym and work it out there or something. Like you're probably going to need some professional help to help you kind of rebuild, because there often with that is like deep guilt and some shame, and it's kind of, if you were wired by a narcissist, then there's probably a lot you're carrying there. So seek professional help if possible.
Yeah, and if this is your first episode with us, you wouldn't know that our big recommendation would always be EMDR therapy, and we have a whole episode on that, episode 10, where my therapist sits in and we interview her about what that therapy entails. But it's a trauma killer. It really it goes back and it really helps you deal with those traumas and get those things filed correctly in your mind, your brain. Yeah. Yep. So you don't have to deal with them anymore, and you're not triggered by them with a fight or flight response and other things. So I would highly recommend that type of thing.
All right. What's the next one?
Next one is, let's see, practice self-care. We talked about it a little bit already. Use assertive communication, express your thoughts and feelings clearly and directly. This is what I was talking about directness versus aggression. Like, don't let them turn it on you and say, oh, you're being so aggressive or whatever.
Right.
And don't be aggressive. Right. Just be matter of fact about it, but be very, very clear and very direct. If you continue to use that tone with me, I'm not going to have a conversation with you or whatever that is, and be prepared for like, what tone? I'm not, whatever. So just be prepared for it.
Not that we've had.
Not that we've ever experienced that. Have we just dealt with an inordinate amount of narcissists in our life, or is this like everybody?
We do live in the United States, right?
Right, we do live in the United States. There is that. Yeah.
Ooh, God.
Oh my goodness. So all the stuff we said before. So express your thoughts clearly. Use I statements and stay calm and factual in your communications. Yeah, gray rock, baby, gray rock all over the place. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. All right, so the next one we have is limit contact when possible. If feasible, reduce or eliminate contact with the narcissist, and if unavoidable situations like work or a parent or something like that, keep their interactions brief and professional or direct.
Yeah. Another one is trust your instincts. If something feels off, trust that feeling, right? Don't let gaslighting make you doubt your own perceptions, which is what happened to me. I was totally gaslit in my 20s. And
same.
Yeah.
Hardcore,
yeah. I mean, not she was trying to make me crazy, but she was trying to neg me into a inferior sense of myself, so she could then manipulate me and change me into what she thought I should be.
Yep.
Which was not who I was at all. And in your 20s, you don't have a sense of who you are yet, a lot of the time, so, well, I don't know. I'm just trying to be a good person and, whatever.
Even so, you don't have the years of experience of other people in professional settings and all that.
True.
Like
all that stuff.
So you just don't, in your 20s, you probably don't have as much insight into what makes up a narcissist, and you just kind of come at it like from this, I don't want to say like blind allegiance. It's not really it, but you don't know what you don't know yet.
There is part of that though. I can see that. I had sort of a blind allegiance to her. Yeah. Those things. Yeah. Anyway.
All right. Don't engage in their games. Oof.
Yeah.
Oh, amen. Don't get pulled in the mud, right? Avoid arguing or trying to prove yourself right, because you're just going to get talked into circles, and it's just going to drive you crazy.
Yeah.
Don't try to change or quote unquote fix them.
You can't.
You can't do it.
You can't fix them.
And recognize and refuse to participate in manipulation attempts. Like, that's the thing. Just if you feel like they're being manipulative, they probably are. So just put the stop on that.
Yep. Okay. Mm-hmm. And lastly, here we have practice mindfulness. So stay present in the moment, and to avoid getting caught in the narcissist tactics. This is what I was talking about before, about that meditation gives you that space, right? If you're a practicing meditator, you have that space between input and output where you can make a better decision in the moment than just reacting to the narcissist, because they want your reaction. That's part of the fuel. They want that reactivity, right? They want to see you lose it, because once you lose it, you give away your power. They have total control. So use mindfulness techniques to manage your emotional responses is a big one in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And then we're just going to say that, like, when you stay in your power, it's about maintaining your sense of self and your boundaries and your well-being in the face of a narcissist behavior. So it's not about controlling or changing the narcissist, again, because it can happen. It won't happen. But it's about managing your response. So it's like, again, respond, don't react. So protect yourself, respond, don't react. That's what we get.
All right. Well, we've been through quite a list here of things. Yeah. So we've talked about the different kinds of narcissists, how they become narcissists, and then what we can do in terms of strategies when we deal with them. And we also dealt with the depressing fact that they are usually not interested in being cured or can be cured of their narcissism. So let's bring it in for a landing here, shall we?
All right.
Once you become better about identifying the signs and symptoms of a narcissist, you might become more aware about different people in your past who had narcissistic tendencies and quite possibly manipulated or gaslit you. And if this is the case, just make sure to remember that their behavior and manipulation was never about you, and you will most likely never change them. So grieve that if you have to. And I encourage you to seek professional help if you are or were ever in a close relationship with a narcissist. That's my takeaway, is like, you're probably going to realize during this podcast the amount of narcissists you had in your life, and you might have a tendency to go blaming yourself. Don't go there. It never was about you. Their behavior was never about you. You were a supplier, and you can feel bad about that and grieve that part of the relationship, but then move on from it, because you couldn't have done anything anyway at the time. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'll say, with the information we just provided you with this episode, you'll probably become better at identifying the people that will come into your life who are narcissists. So we're hoping that we're equipping you with some tools here. So being able to better determine narcissistic traits, that'll put you in your own power, because then you can practice the physical, the mental, and emotional boundaries that we were talking about. And those are crucial in dealing with narcissists. And you'll become harder for a narcissist to manipulate, and harder for them to identify you as a quote unquote supplier. And they'll eventually move on to the next person that they can manipulate and gaslight, because that's how they roll. Just remind yourself that you'll likely never change a narcissist, never be granted the accountability you need from them. And you're never going to be fully seen by them. So you can allow you to move forward with your life, and allow the space to let the kind, empathetic, supportive, accountable people that you deserve in your life, you can let them in instead. So
start being that gray rock, and then the narcissists don't attach to you anymore. And then you can, like, I don't really think I have any. Do you have any narcissists in your life right now, Nora? I don't think I really have any. I have some people that exhibit fearful.
Not in my close life. No, not in my close circle.
No. I think that has to do with our experience around them and employing things like the gray rock method, that you just become as uninteresting as watching paint dry to them, and they're on to the next person they can really get their claws into,
Right. And I'll say too that the interesting thing is, I've been reading and absorbing more of the information around narcissists, is it's really, it's enlightening in so many ways, but I'm realizing that I had a sense about people that I would meet that I can now identify. Now I have the language, and I have the tools where I'm like, oh, I sensed that to be like, don't let them in fully and kind of be like careful around them. And now I'm like, oh, it's because they're narcissist.
Yeah.
And like, oh, I like the things I sense, but now I have better tools. And I hope that whoever's listening to this does as well now. So,
well, and this goes back to, if you don't remember some of the things that, I mean, we mentioned a lot of things in this podcast, right? Just the main thing there that we said near the end, though, is trust your instinct, because you were right. You were right back then. And you all listening, you're right now. If you think there's something amiss, there is, and trust your gut when it goes to that. You don't need to know everything in order to make that realization. The
intuition and the instinct stuff too. I always recommend that to in any situation, especially to women. And really, what that is, it's like the amount of data that your brain is taking in specific circumstances that is just like not fast enough to process, but it is. All of that to me is just your brain is trying to alert you of something that it's still trying to process.
Yeah.
And again, listen to that gut feeling that you have about either people or places always, but especially when it comes to people who might be narcissistic or malignant narcissists. Anyway.
All right, Nora, let's bring it in. And I love you, but only for what you supply me. When you stop doing that, this relationship will be over and the podcast will end.
I love the way that you make me feel.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And when you stop making me feel that way by like being a jerk, then I'm just going to go on to the next print. No,
there you go. Episode 15, the love bombing is over. That's what it should be called. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining us this week. Yes. We hope you got something out of the podcast for real. We love you too. And we will see you next time on the show. Peace out. Bye, everybody.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
If you'd like to get in touch with us about anything you've heard on the show, please feel free to drop us an email at ifweonlyknewthenpod@gmail.com.